Kenny Pickett at 1, plus 110. Flacco right behind him, plus 200. Then Shedeur, then Dillon Gabriel, who was actually drafted 2 rounds earlier. So Brew will. Who wants to start here? Not Coach, because Coach is going to pour cold water on whatever everyone's saying. So not Coach. What are the chances that Shedeur is the Browns' Week 1 starter?
I think there's basically zero chance he's the Week 1 starter. I think at best for Shedeur, he goes in there, blows the Browns away with his attitude, his work ethic, his leadership, and his skill, and is playing well. And at that point, like that's through mini camp, training camp, all this. And then I think I think it's probably Flacco starts Week 1. But the feeling within the building is that Shedeur is going to eventually replace Flacco as our start, assuming it goes poorly with Flacco. Now, I'm basing this on Shedeur winning over the organization because he has to do it. I don't think he has to win over the locker room. Like David Njoku, I think he tweeted this, the tight end, let them all hate, fam. You know, we got you. We got what you got in you. So I think some of the players will rally around Shedeur just seeing what I even think. And I said, don't coddle Shedeur last week. But it felt unfair to me for him to drop to the 5th round. So I think a lot of the players will be with him. But he has got to win over Stefanski and Andrew Berry and, you know, the whole organization. So assuming he does that, he still, I think, would be second in line in Week 1 with the feeling that, okay, but we're going to give him a chance pretty soon here.
Thanks for the lead-in. It says I was going to pour.
Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, probably not. I'm with Brew on. It's not a zero chance that he starts Week 1, but it's pretty close to zero chance he starts Week 1. And I think he's at a disadvantage now because of only having 3 preseason games where you've got to get whoever you may think is the starter, or at least the top 2 guys, a lot of reps, and it's just not quite the same as it was for young guys to really prove that they can contribute with that abbreviated schedule. So that's a problem. He's got to go in and learn completely a new system, where if he was a first-round draft pick, it would still be a new system, but a lot of it would be catered to make sure that it was as successful for that player as possible. So he's got to learn that system. He's got to compete. He doesn't have any background in the NFL, so Pickett has a huge advantage, and obviously Flacco has a huge advantage. And I say huge because they at least have had that experience. They've started in games. They know what a season is like. To me, I'd be really interested to see what the odds are of him. You know, who's going to get cut in that room?
Man,
do they keep all 4? Or
Kenny Pickett's the answer to that.
You think he's going to? You think Kenny?
Well, he's the worst player in the locker room. Listen, if you bring up his win-loss record with the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm gonna be very upset because those Pittsburgh Steelers saw him and then he was healthy and they had a playoff game and they knew his win-loss record and they said, Mason Rudolph, take the reins because we can only take.
People saw Sam Darnold and they got rid of him. People saw Baker.
Coach, those people had adult-sized hands, and they were better. They were better in college. They were better prospects. They were more highly drafted.
They saw Geno Smith. And
poor Geno got his jaw broken by a teammate, and it derailed some things. Like, that's a different situation. So, here, listen. I think of everyone on the show, I was probably the most pessimistic about Shedeur going into the draft.
I don't think so.
What? Okay, well, maybe you and me, maybe it was a tie. But as far as I talked about how I thought he had real limitations as an NFL passer, as an NFL, not just passer, just quarterback, that I thought would make him not as highly sought of a prospect as other people thought. With that said, he is, to me, objectively, should be the second best quarterback on that roster, and the best is 40 years old. And so, like, I do not think shout out to Howie Roseman for somehow getting a 5th-round pick in this Kenny Pickett trade. I think Kenny Pickett is unplayable. Dillon Gabriel is, to my eye, and I'm not a scout, and I'm not going to act like I'm watching a dozen Oregon games a year, but I watched enough Oregon where at no point was I like, ooh, that Oregon quarterback, feel like he's a future NFL starter, and nobody did. I don't think Dillon Gabriel did, which is one of the reasons they said they liked him in the interviews so much, or some of the reporting was, because he was all in on, like, I'm going to be so good in your quarterback room. I'm going to help your starter get ready. I know it's a long process for me, which is very commendable and got him drafted higher than most people expected. Shedeur is better than him. I think we have a lot of evidence from them playing similar competition that Shedeur is better than Dillon Gabriel. I understand the Browns didn't draft him as such. I get that. So to me, it's Joe Flacco should be the week 1 starter. I think these odds are insane. I think Kenny Pickett has the smallest chance, honestly, being the week 1 starter because I don't think he's going to be on the team. I think their plan is to go with Flacco, and if Shedeur is anywhere close to the player a lot of draft experts thought he was, Joel Klatt, who we respect, thinks he is, Brew, I obviously respect his opinion, thinks he could have been a legitimate top 10 pick, he should be the backup.
So the two guys that are going to make the decision, being the GM and the head coach, as to who starts, now didn't want to take him in the 3rd round. They took Dillon Gabriel. But suddenly, because the rest of the world feels like Shedeur's been slighted in this process, they're going to be like, you know, the rest of the world is right. We're going to move him up to number 2.
Hold on a second.
Because everybody else thinks we were wrong. So now we must be wrong. So now we're going to do this.
I think honestly, Coach,
it's not realistic.
Okay, here's the other thing that's not realistic.
For him to even be 2?
No.
No, just to think that suddenly, just because he's on that roster and the whole world thinks he's been. You saw the reaction of the head coach and the GM when he got drafted.
So hold on. But let's actually talk this through about the realistic parts of it. So how did he get drafted?
I think the owner said,
exactly,
in the 5th round, we're going to draft this guy.
Exactly.
How'd that work out for Johnny Manziel when the owner said do that?
I get, but did Johnny Manziel get a chance to play?
Yeah, Johnny Manziel absolutely, and he was taken in the 1st round.
Yes,
not the 5th round.
So the point I'm making is, if we were talking about the kind of hardcore pragmatism of the politics of how this player was taken, what do you think is more impactful on his opportunity to beat out Dillon Gabriel? The fact that Dillon Gabriel was taken 60 picks ahead of him, or the fact that the head coach's boss said, I want this guy? Because I think that even though it looked bad, and I agree, I am agreeing with you that that's why he got, if the owner had nothing to do with it, I actually think that would hurt Shedeur's chances. If it was purely Stefanski and Barry's football evaluation is this guy's worthy of a 3rd, this guy's worthy of a 5th, then the guy who had the 3rd round pick is obviously ahead of him. Mm-hmm. But if we think, and I think you're right, the owner put his finger on the scale, the owner's not all of a sudden going to be like, okay, done putting my finger on the scale here, boys.
But here's what most people realize is that when the owner starts doing that, and you're in a year like they're in, where they could easily, this administration could be gone, you better not worry about the owner telling you who to start, because let's say you start him and he stinks. The owner's going to be like, that's what I pay you for, to evaluate guys. It was just a suggestion. I just suggested we take him in the 5th round. I didn't mean you had to play him. So they should play whoever they feel.
Which will be Flacco.
So if it's Pickett, if it's Flacco, if it's Gabriel, they should play whoever they feel is going to give them the best chance to win, because playing Shedeur and him going in and not being the best guy is not going to save their jobs.
If Shedeur is impressive, and again, to me it's critical because he's got this bad reputation now. So if he goes in and impresses them in all facets, then I think, like Nick said, the owner will be like, look, he's been great. He's thrown the ball well. Maybe he doesn't throw it better than everybody, but he's right there with everybody. The owner may say, look, play Shedeur. He clearly wants the cachet of what his name brings. And also, here's the thing, too. They made that trade at number 2 looking like they're building up capital for next year. Yes. So if they think Shedeur is even possibly their quarterback of the future because of what he does in training camp, they got to see what he can do, because if they don't think he can do anything,
it's a 5th round draft pick. They don't have to see anything.
But it's a 5th round
no, but
draft pick
if the owner made him take him, and don't you think, Coach, even you were down on him, you don't think he's more than a 5th round talent?
I think that the player, you're looking at the player holistically. And it's not just their ability. And remember, this guy was sacked the most in college football. Yes. What happened with Cleveland Browns' offensive line last year? They were sacked their quarterbacks were sacked the 2nd most in the NFL. So now you're going to take the most sacked college quarterback and put him behind an offensive line that gave up the 2nd most sacks and think you're going to get
he showed he can function behind a bad offensive line.
Well,
but we're going to take a weakness and add it to a weakness.
I agree with that.
But they do need to find out what he can do. So if they're like, he's not our guy.
I understand Coach's point that finding out what he can do is less critical if he's a fifth-round pick, because a lot of fifth-round picks you never find out anything. They just don't make the team, or they practice squad guys. But here is the scenario that I think is the most realistic that I could totally see playing out. Joe Flacco, they signed him to probably be the starter. It was reported today by Mike Silver that the holdup on the trade, the reason the Browns trade from 2 to 5 with the Jags was not consummated until draft day was the Browns had told the Jags, listen, if something crazy happens and Cam Ward is there at 2, we're taking him. So, like, we're going to take Cam Ward, so we just got to wait and see. So the Browns were, maybe we get Cam Ward, probably Flacco's our starter. That was their plan. If we are now to a point where they've made the decision, we need to bench Flacco, or Flacco gets hurt. But let's assume we need to bench him, which means the season's not going great. If I am the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, and my number one goal is to maintain being the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, even if I had Dylan Gabriel rated as a 78 prospect and Shedeur as a 74, if the season's already going down the we've benched our quarterback track, my only parachute is, well, I'll play the quarterback the owner likes and maybe get something out of it. Like, that to me is just...
Yeah, it won't save you. Won't save you. And here's the thing, we're disregarding Kenny Pickett. They did they gave up a 5th-round draft pick for Kenny Pickett, so we can say that they think, why would they do that? Just because they wanted to fill a roster spot? They obviously felt...
Don't.
You can talk about his little hands, but they gave up a 5th-round draft pick for the guy.
Yeah, that was a bad move.
What is he making? I think he's like $4 or $5 million. So
$5 million.
There is some feeling, and it's got to be somewhat significant that he has a chance to be the starter.
Can I ask you a question, Coach, before we move on? I don't know if we quite have time to move on, but I want to ask you this question. Bruce scenario, Shedeur comes in and wows everybody. At the same time, he's going to be, not Vegas odds, but 4th on the depth chart, probably. If it went perfectly, does the 4th quarterback on the depth chart have a chance to wow people? Like, how do you wow people when you're not getting a ton of snaps, when you're learning the playbook, when there's so many people ahead of you? What opportunities do you even have to wow people?
It's pretty small. Like, you got to go in, and for the plays that you have, you've got to pop. So either you make some great read, or you adjust the protection and you pick up a blitz, or you make an incredible throw. There's got to be something that pops where you're like, okay, let's give him a few more reps. And then those reps get divvied up pretty quickly when you've got 4 guys that you're trying to look at. And there's a significant learning curve that happens for these young guys. There's a reason that very few number 1 draft picks go in and light it up early. So it's a learning curve out of college, and it's trying to get the terminology. They're not catering the system for him. He doesn't have the benefit of the incredible support staff that he had at Colorado, in the sense that his dad was the head coach. It's a totally different scenario. It makes it harder to wow.
Yeah, and I get all that, but one of us is going to be wrong about this. We'll see. You're talking about Shedeur like he's just a typical 5th-round pick. Like, he's just a 5th-rounder, which I get. Your average 5th-round pick is going to get hardly any shot. But I think he's different. Not only because and most people seem to think he's better than that, but he is a name. If the owner did say draft him, then he's going to get more of a shot than your typical 5th-rounder.
Yeah, now the question is, if the owner did say draft Johnny Manziel, and if the owner did say go get and pay whatever we need to pay for Deshaun Watson, and now the owner did say go get Shedeur Sanders, at what point is he going to step back and say, maybe I should step
Probably
out?
not. I don't think he's going to.
Maybe after Shedeur
But
fails,
I think the lesson
after the 3rd time.
I think the lesson from Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski might not be, and I think this is, I promise I'm saying this as a compliment to you, not the lesson you would take. I think you would take the lesson from Deshaun Watson of, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I didn't want to do it. he should know better, leave football to the football people. I think the lesson other people would take is that went as poorly as it could have. And we're still here because we did what he wanted. We always said Deshaun was our guy. We always said he's our quarterback. We always supported it. We always took the bullets for it. And it's the difference, I think, between people whose goal for the job, and I'm talking in abstract here because I don't know these people, but just in general. Goal of the job is to do the best job possible, or if the goal of the job is to keep the job. And sometimes those things, sadly, in dysfunctional organizations are in conflict. And what I do think Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski have done a great job of is keeping the job. And so I think a lot of that is placating the owner, and that might also be we traded a fifth for Kenny Pickett. We signed Joe Flacco. We just spent the ninth, whatever the pick was, a third round on Dillon Gabriel. Yes, sir, we will draft Shedeur Sanders and invite all of this into our building because you want us to.
But what most people learn over time is that when you do those things and you do make those concessions, very rarely do those concessions play out in the terms of you get the benefit of the doubt. It's more in the fact of like, hey, I'm not a football guy.
Yeah.
You're supposed to make those decisions. I was just a businessman making a suggestion in the 5th round because it looked like great value.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get more from the show and to check out clips from other shows on FS1.